It's Christian with St. Augustine TV. You know, I enjoy visiting old cemeteries in historic areas. The names etched into stone tell tales of that town. I've lived in St. Augustine for more than a decade. I've walked downtown hundreds of times and explored it with a fair amount of curiosity. But recently I realized there was an important piece of St. Augustine history I knew little about. It's called San Sebastian Cemetery. It's tucked away in West Augustine, just a few minutes from downtown. I've even driven by it a couple of times. You know, if you want to understand the real history of St. Augustine, not just the history marketed for tourist consumption, you eventually end up here. Most of the stories told about St. Augustine revolve around Spanish explorers and governors, missionaries, Native Americans, Henry Flagler, and maybe even pirates. But what about everyone else? What about those who built the hotels, who maintained the city, worked the farms, the railroads, the kitchens, the docks, and the homes? Where are their stories? In some cases, they're buried right here. This is San Sebastian Cemetery. Together with the adjacent Pinehurst Cemetery, they are one of the oldest, or depending on who you ask, the oldest African American cemeteries in Florida. Archaeological research and surviving markers show burials date back to at least the middle of the 19th century. The property was formally established in the 1880s as a burial place for St. Augustine's Black community. Even in death, segregation existed. For generations, African American St. Augustinians were not buried alongside white residents. Cemeteries were separated on religion and race. And among those buried here are men and women who were born into slavery. One of the most striking features of San Sebastian Cemetery can be found on several of its oldest grave markers. Look carefully when you walk around. You may notice carved chains. These are symbolic. They indicate that the deceased had been born enslaved. Some of these men and women were born before the Civil War, experienced emancipation, and then spent the remainder of their lives navigating the difficult realities of the Jim Crow South. Their stories don't appear in history books. Yet here, in stone and concrete, traces of those lives remain. The cemetery also preserves African cultural traditions carried across generations. Visitors sometimes notice seashells placed on graves. They may appear to be simply decorations, but shells have a deep meaning in African and Gullah Geechee burial traditions. They symbolize the journey of the soul across the water to the spirit world, and the connection between life and the afterlife. Families place shells on graves to help guide loved ones on their final journey. Those customs survive slavery, segregation, and even survive today. San Sebastian and Pinehurst cemeteries are also the resting place of veterans whose service to the nation often went unrecognized. Men who served in conflicts ranging from the Civil War through the World Wars are buried here. Some were also laborers on the railroads that helped to transform Florida. Others worked in agriculture, construction, domestic service, and industries that helped to build modern St. Augustine. They are unsung heroes. Some spent their lives contributing to a community that denied them equal treatment. One of the unique things about this cemetery that I don't think I've ever seen anyplace else is there are dozens of hand-carved gravestones. This one even has a little heart at the bottom. Over time, the cemetery fell into serious neglect. As families moved away and records disappeared, many graves became forgotten. Headstones cracked. Vegetation overtook burial sites. Some graves lost their markers entirely. For decades, like other historic cemeteries, it became obscured by thick overgrowth. That's until a local community organization, the West Augustine Improvement Association, spent years working to change that. Their efforts have uncovered forgotten graves, documented names, cleaned overgrowth, and brought some renewed attention to the cemetery. Honoring the dead has been deeply important across all human cultures. It connects us to traditions and offers perspective for the living. We inherit from them as future generations will inherit from us. Today, San Sebastian and Pinehurst cemeteries serve as more than just a burial ground. It is a historical record of people who helped to build St. Augustine. For some, a record of people who were enslaved, who lived through Reconstruction, and the indignities of segregation. The story of San Sebastian and Pinehurst cemeteries is a reminder of a different kind of history. A history not of coquina forts or grand hotels, but in the lives of ordinary people whose labor and perseverance helped shape the city we know today. Their names may not appear on monuments downtown, but they remain here, waiting to be remembered. San Sebastian and Pinehurst cemeteries are not simply places where people are buried, but a place of forgotten history. If you want to help the cause and help keep these cemeteries maintained, please check out the West Augustine Improvement Association's website for volunteer events or to donate to support this important piece of St. Augustine history. Hey, thanks for watching. For more local St. Augustine content, don't forget to like and subscribe.